Every morning when you open your eyes, you're not just stepping into a new day, you're stepping into a battlefield of thoughts. No one announces it to you. There's no alarm sounding. But inside you, a war begins between staying in bed or getting up, between procrastination or action, between what's comfortable and what's right. And if you don't carry a sharp weapon called life purpose, you will be defeated before you even leave your bed. I'm not talking about dazzling greatness. I'm talking about something that keeps you from living aimlessly, acting inconsistently, or making choices driven by fleeting emotions. Marcus Aurelius was once an emperor who had to face countless things: war, plague, rebellion, the deaths of loved ones. Yet he consistently wrote deep reflections in his journal about clarity, about acting in accordance with the noblest part of human nature. And you don't need to be a king to live like that. You only need to wake up with a simple question: what do I live for today? A question that seems small but changes everything. How you use your time, how you respond to challenges, how you answer every decision. Purpose doesn't need to be grand. Sometimes it's simply the resolve to be a better human than yesterday, a sense of responsibility for what you've committed to, the courage to keep going even when no one's watching. But it must be clear enough to stop you from being pulled by petty distractions, strong enough to let you say no to temptation, and deep enough to prevent you from drifting through life, having everything, yet lacking soul. A person without purpose is like a ship with no rudder, swept away by the waves of controversy, dragged by others' expectations, weighed down by trivial failures. But a person with purpose, even if poor, even without notable accomplishments, carries a deep serenity. Because they know where they're going, every action, every choice, every word they speak comes from a powerful inner center, the awareness of their reason for existence. When you wake up without knowing why you exist, everything easily distracts you. A message, a criticism, a wave of tiredness, or a minor failure all gain more influence than they deserve. But when you start your day with internal clarity, those things are just noise. I'm not talking about writing a declaration. I'm talking about absolute honesty with yourself. That you don't live to prove something, to keep up with anyone, or to satisfy temporary emotions. That you have something above all fleeting feelings, a principle, a responsibility, a mission. Marcus called it living according to nature, which means living in alignment with the noblest part of you, with the position you've been entrusted within the order of this world. And that is not theory. It is the compass for every decision, from what you'll eat, say, do, to how you respond to insults or difficulties. When you live with purpose, you no longer need motivation to act, because everything you do has a reason strong enough for you to commit voluntarily. Discipline is no longer something you force on yourself, but the natural outcome of a heart with direction. You're not a workaholic. You're someone who refuses to live a single day without contributing to what you believe in. And that's why you rise stronger than any exhaustion. In today's world, where people are pulled into thousands of choices and noises from social media, purpose acts as an absolute filter. It helps you eliminate what doesn't serve you. It turns things you should do into things you don't need to do. It makes you the proactive one, not someone dragged along by others' schedules. Every morning, you can ask yourself, what was I born to do today? And each night, you can look back and ask, did I live true to my purpose today? When you live like that, you don't need to do anything special to feel valuable. Your presence already has value because it's placed in the right position at the right time with the right spirit of responsibility toward your own life. Purpose isn't something you need to shout. It's something you need to whisper to yourself enough so that every action of the day aligns with it. Start tomorrow morning. When you open your eyes, don't ask, what do I want? Ask, what am I called to do today? And you'll see a deep inner energy will carry you through procrastination, laziness, and fear, because when you carry purpose, you carry the strongest weapon into every battle you're about to face. You are not lacking discipline. You simply haven't clearly identified what is truly worth being disciplined for. Because discipline doesn't arise on its own. It is activated when there is a value strong enough to serve as its foundation. A reason compelling enough to make you commit, even on days when you no longer feel like trying. You can test hundreds of time management methods, reminder apps, or external motivational pushes, but if you haven't determined what is the most important thing in your life, then all attempts at discipline are just patchwork. You'll be swept into urgent things and forget what's truly essential. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If you have no direction, everything will lead you off course." Discipline begins with prioritization, but prioritization doesn't mean arranging your daily to-do list. It means deciding what holds core value to you, so much so that you're willing to sacrifice, say no, and restructure your entire life around it. When you haven't truly understood what you most treasure, you will easily be pulled toward what sparkles, what's easy, or what the crowd cheers for. But you won't have the persistence to pursue those things to the end because they don't belong to you. They're not rooted in your value system. And so when difficulties arise, you'll let go. Don't start with discipline. Start with truth. The truth about whose priorities you're living by, yours or someone else's. Are you pursuing something because it truly matters to you, or just because it looks attractive when others have it? When you answer those questions honestly, you'll begin to see clearly what's worth keeping and what needs to go. Discipline isn't about saying no to everything. Discipline is the ability to say no to things that don't align with your core value system. And to do that, you must know what your center is. For Marcus, that center was to live according to nature, which meant to live true to the qualities of reason, responsibility, and duty. Every day, he didn't ask, "What do I feel like doing?" but rather, "What must I do to live in alignment with the role I've been entrusted with?" What about you? If you've never paused to identify what truly matters most to you in this phase of your life, then it's no surprise that you find yourself easily distracted, easily giving up, easily angered, easily disheartened, not because you're weak, but because you lack a gravitational center. When your mind has no gravity, it will be pulled by any external force stronger than you. Gravity here is what you believe to be important, and that belief must be repeated often and deeply enough to shape identity. A person who knows what's at their core doesn't need to struggle each morning to decide whether to wake up early. They get up because they're serving what they've chosen. A person who knows what's essential doesn't battle over every decision. They choose because they've already defined the criteria for deciding. That's why people with clear values hesitate less, procrastinate less, and feel less out of control. Discipline is a result, not a starting point. The result of reorganizing your entire life around a stable axis of values. The clearer you are about what matters, the less you're swayed. And the less you're swayed, the more you can choose to live as you wish, instead of being dragged by what others expect from you. If you feel undisciplined, don't rush to blame yourself. Ask instead, what am I serving? The thing I do every day, does it truly matter to me? Or am I just doing it out of fear of being left behind, fear of being less than others, because it gives me a sense of busyness? Marcus wrote, "Don't waste time thinking about what others are doing. Turn back to yourself. When you stop chasing what doesn't truly matter, you'll see discipline doesn't come as punishment, but as joy, because you're fully living for what you've chosen, not what you're enduring." Let me suggest something simple yet incredibly powerful. Write down the 3 things that truly matter most to you in this life. Not the things you think should matter, but the ones you feel deeply connected to. Then ask yourself, is your time, energy, and daily habits serving those 3 things? If not, don't blame yourself for lacking discipline because you're trying to force a lifestyle that has no underlying value foundation. Discipline becomes natural only when it's an extension of what you cherish. And you only truly have discipline when you're willing to place what matters most at the highest position in both thought and action. Without clarity, there will be no lasting discipline, and without discipline, there can be no life of depth. That's the truth you must face if you want to live as someone mentally mature and free in your choices. No one is coming to save you. No one can live for you, decide for you, or take responsibility for the life you are living every day. And that, contrary to the loneliness you may have felt, is the greatest gift life has given you. Because the moment you realize that no one owes you anything, you also no longer owe the world an explanation for your delays, your fears, or your lack of growth. You are completely free to take full ownership of everything. Marcus Aurelius called it the inner citadel, a power to govern oneself regardless of the chaos around. He was an emperor, but he didn't let the throne determine his value as a human being. He wrote by night while war waged outside the camp. He didn't wait for favorable conditions to think rightly. He behaved with virtue in the middle of the storm because he knew what lies in your hands cannot be taken unless you give it up your. You might be waiting for someone to lift you up, someone who truly understands you, motivates you, guides you out of life's tangled mess. But the longer you wait, the more you wither. The more you hope someone else will change you, the more you miss the opportunity to grow. No one can save you because no one can reach deep into your mind and rewrite the way you think, the way you react, the way you choose. Only you can do that. Self-reliance is not about forcing yourself to be strong. It's about recognizing I can learn, I can train, I can rise, I can choose again, regardless of what my past has been. And that is the moment you break free from the role of victim. Victims always need someone to rescue them. Those who live as active agents don't need rescue because they are liberating themselves every day through their actions, their choices, their commitment to live aligned with their value. Don't misunderstand. You can still receive help. You can still be loved, guided, supported, but no one can help you if you refuse to stand up for yourself. No one can walk you through the dark unless you're willing to open your eyes, take a step, and take responsibility for the light you seek. You cannot hire someone to exercise for you and expect to become strong. You cannot ask someone to meditate for you and hope for inner peace. No one can live mindfully for you inside your own mind. And that is the miracle. Because if change depended on others, you would be forever imprisoned in their will. But once you realize that everything, freedom, discipline, transformation lies within you, then you no longer need anyone's permission, no longer need perfect conditions, no longer need to wait until your emotions feel ready. You begin. And that is enough. Marcus wrote, "Stand up straight or be made straight by yourself." That sentence doesn't soothe. It cuts like a blade through every excuse. It returns to you the power you once gave away to circumstances, to other people, to fate. From today on, you are no longer allowed to say, "I can't," when the truth is, "I'm not yet ready to take responsibility." Self-reliance is the root of self-respect. Those who rescue themselves are not arrogant. They are humble but firm. They don't need to prove anything, don't need to show off, but within them is a mental system forged through discipline, through experience, through the many times they wanted to give up but stayed the course because they knew no one else can take the next step for them. And I say this to you, no one else can rewrite your tomorrow, but you can begin today. This is not easy. Because the habit of blaming, of assigning responsibility to others, of making excuses is deeply embedded in your nervous system. Every time you say because of, you are denying your inner strength. Every time you say, if only, you are avoiding the power of choice you always had. And every time you say, I'll change when others change, you are freezing your life in the hands of someone who cannot even control themselves. Saving yourself doesn't mean doing everything alone. It means being proactive. You choose companions rather than waiting for rescuers. You seek knowledge instead of complaining about lack of direction. You take action despite uncertainty because standing still gets you nowhere. Saving yourself means understanding. No one owes you the life you want, but you can absolutely build it choice by choice, hour by hour, day. There will be moments you fall, but that is not failure. It is a test to see whether you'll choose again, stand up, and continue. Marcus was not someone who never felt lost, but he didn't let that confusion define him. He returned to values, to reason, to discipline, and that allowed him to remain lucid even as the world around him drowned in chaos. You can be that too. Begin with one simple question. Am I living as if I am the only one responsible for my life? If the answer is no, then don't look for someone to blame. Begin with one decision. From today, I choose to stand up for myself. Not because someone sees it, not because someone validates it, but because I know no one is coming to save me. And that is the greatest opportunity I've ever been given. Motivation is powerful, but fleeting. It rises on inspiration and fades with emotion. And your life cannot be constructed on the unstable ground of temporary highs. If you only act when you feel motivated, then you're letting emotional volatility determine the trajectory of your progress. But discipline, it doesn't ask you to feel ready. It only asks that you show up, and that consistent showing up, regardless of your internal state, is what builds a mind you can trust and a life others can rely on. Marcus Aurelius didn't wait for the perfect moment to write thoughts that would transcend centuries. He wrote during sieges, while sick, under pressure and emotional strain. He didn't act because emotions gave permission. He acted because principle demanded presence. And that's what you need to rewire into your own behavior. You don't need a surge of inspiration to begin. You need responsibility. You don't need a perfect mood to do the work. You need to remember that every act of showing up is one more neural vote for the person you're becoming. We often confuse excitement with commitment. Excitement is when something is new, stimulating, easy. Commitment is when the novelty has worn off, fatigue sets in, or boredom creeps in, but you continue anyway. Why? Because you understand progress is not an emotional state. It's a behavioral pattern. True commitment is not conditional. You don't need a clear sky to run. You don't need silence to meditate. You don't need a perfect day to do the right thing. You just need to be there. That's it. Discipline doesn't mean you always get it right. It means you don't turn a stumble into surrender. Maybe today's effort wasn't your best, but you showed up, you wrote, even if just a few lines. You trained, even if just for 10 minutes. You studied, even if only one page. That's the dividing line between the person who talks about goals and the one who builds identity. The discipline don't wait for perfect conditions. They create forward movement within imperfect ones. This is not to say emotions don't matter, but they cannot be your operating system. Emotions change minute by minute. Some days everything feels clear and flowing. Other days, even getting out of bed feels like resistance training. If you let emotion lead, you'll only show up when life is easy and disappear when it gets hard. But if you live by commitment, you become structurally reliable. Others can lean on you because you can lean on yourself. Commitment doesn't start from belief. It starts from action. And action builds belief through repetition. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you don't just finish a task, you forge self-respect. You reinforce a neural pattern of, I am the kind of person who follows through. And that identity is what keeps you going when no one is clapping, when progress feels invisible, and when momentum hasn't yet appeared. It's internal strength. It cannot be borrowed. It must be earned. Marcus once wrote, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. That's the essence of discipline. It's not about waiting to feel inspired to be your best self. It's about showing up as if there's no other option but to live with integrity, not for praise, not for reward, but because the tension of not living aligned with your values becomes unbearable. Daily presence doesn't require perfection. It requires consistency. Write one page, train for 10 minutes, read a paragraph, send that email, revise that plan. You don't have to do everything. You just have to do enough to maintain the loop between who you are and who you're becoming. That loop is your anchor. When fatigue tempts you, when distractions seduce you, or when doubt whispers in your ear. And that accumulation of small daily actions, that's what people later call a miracle. If you ask, how do I maintain discipline when motivation is gone? The answer is you don't maintain, you return. You tell yourself one small act today is a win. Then you do it. And then you do it again tomorrow. You don't worry about next week. You only ask, did I show up today? And if the answer is yes, then you're rewiring your identity one repetition at a time. Discipline isn't about pressure. It's about clarity. Ask yourself, what am I living for? If your answer is precise enough, important enough, emotionally salient enough, then showing up won't feel like a burden. It becomes an expression of self-respect, of alignment, of love for the life you're constructing. You don't show up to impress. You show up because you can't stomach the contradiction of knowing what's right and not doing it. If you wait for motivation to act, your life will be full of waiting rooms. But if you commit to daily presence, no matter the mood, your life will be full of growth. That is the difference between people who live by feeling and people who live by values. Which one are you? That's decided not by what you feel, but by what you do tomorrow morning. No one teaches you how to remain steady amid adversity through textbook lessons. That kind of steadiness can only be forged through practice. But here's the problem. If you only train your mind and willpower when adversity strikes, then you're already too late. No warrior waits until the day of battle to sharpen his sword. And you cannot wait until life collapses on you to begin forging yourself. That is why you must willingly step into discomfort. Not because you enjoy hardship, but because you are training yourself not to crumble when the unexpected comes. Marcus Aurelius did not live in luxury, even though he was an emperor. He chose discomfort as part of his process of building inner strength. He didn't wait for life to strip him of comfort. He voluntarily gave it up to keep his mind alert and his spirit agile. He understood this. Whatever you depend on too much becomes your weakness, even comfort, especially comfort. The modern world is attacking you with convenience. One click and food arrives. One swipe and you're entertained until late at night. Everything is fast, easy, and smooth. But have you noticed, greater comfort doesn't make people stronger. It makes you weaker without realizing it. It causes you to overreact to minor things. It makes you feel overwhelmed by situations that should only require a calm breath to get through. And then when real adversity strikes, illness, loss, failure, you find yourself unable to bear it, not because you're not intelligent, but because you never trained your mind. You must understand, voluntarily stepping into discomfort is how you deliberately create your own training zone. No one wants pain, but you can choose small pain so you don't get knocked out by big pain. You can choose to wake up an hour earlier to train the habit of initiative. You can choose to skip a meal one day to realize that hunger doesn't kill you but helps you appreciate every bite. You can choose to walk instead of ordering a ride, to learn patience and control the pace of your life. Every time you step out of your comfort zone, you send a signal to your mind. I do not fear difficulty. You'll be surprised what happens after a few weeks of living with this mindset. Every inconvenience you used to avoid begins to become an ally. They no longer stress you out. They become tools to measure your self-control. You no longer lash out when disturbed. You no longer feel lost when plans change. You no longer panic in unexpected situations because your mind has become familiar with handling the uncomfortable. And that familiarity builds a resilience that no one can give you except yourself. Willingly embracing discomfort is not self-punishment. It's a journey to restructure your definition of uncomfortable. When you're no longer obsessed with feeling good all the time, you become free. You can sit with imperfection. You can wait without agitation. You can face pressure without losing yourself. That is a kind of peace that only comes when you're no longer dependent on everything going smoothly. Marcus once wrote, "Be ready to eat plainly, dress simply, and sleep under a roofless sky if necessary, because that will keep you from being dependent on any condition." That quote isn't advocating poverty. It's advocating freedom. Freedom from the fear of lack, freedom from dependency, freedom from needing everything to be under your control before you dare to remain calm. You cannot predict adversity, but you can train your inner reflexes to avoid helplessness. And those reflexes don't come from reading one more self-help book. They come from real actions. Every day, when you deliberately choose what is difficult, slow, inconvenient, or uncomfortable, when you walk into those conditions with a learning mindset, you're no longer someone who passively endures. You become someone who actively trains. And here's the greatest transformation. You start to feel grateful for what isn't easy. You eat more slowly. You breathe more deeply. You look at things you once took for granted, and you see within them a value that only loss or deprivation can reveal. Discomfort at that moment ceases to be an annoyance. It becomes a mirror of gratitude, a tool for mental training, the most demanding yet fair teacher you'll ever have. If you find yourself too easily irritated, too easily losing control, or constantly giving in to short-term temptations, the problem might not be that your willpower is weak. It might be that you've never trained it. And the most effective training is not waiting for adversity, but creating small, controlled hardships and walking into them with a mindset of growth. Each cold morning, you still go out for a walk. Each time you're tired, but still finish one more task. Each craving you're able to say no to. These small decisions accumulate and transform you into someone who cannot be shaken. Willingly stepping into discomfort is your declaration that you're ready to become someone who not only lives well when things are easy, but lives rightly even when everything falls apart. And that is the sign of true inner strength. The strong are not those who have never faced difficulty. They are the ones who no longer fear it because they've befriended it long ago. You're not exhausted because you're doing too much. You're exhausted because you're trying to control things that are not in your hands. You're not worn out because you're weak, but because your mind is fixated on things that cannot be changed. Meanwhile, the only thing you truly have control over, yourself, is being neglected, distracted, and traded away for a false sense of external control. That's why you feel lost, even though you've tried your best. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If it's outside your control, let it out of your mind." Simple, sharp, direct. And it was also the key that helped him maintain his reason amidst war, betrayal, death, and grief. Because he understood this clearly. The only thing with lasting value is the ability to navigate from within, your reaction, your choices, your way of thinking, not the world's fluctuations. You cannot control what others think of you. You cannot control their behavior, their emotions, or their decisions. But you can control how you respond to criticism. You can control your attitude when facing rejection. You can control the act of continuing to move forward instead of sitting in self-pity. And only when you return to your true zone of influence can you reclaim your power, the kind that doesn't come from changing circumstances, but from mastering your inner world. Focusing on what you can control doesn't mean being passive or indifferent to the world. On the contrary, it allows you to act more effectively, more clearly, and be less drawn into negative spirals. When you channel your energy into what you own, you become more discerning in how you ask questions. What can I do in this situation? Which response will make me proud of myself? What next step will help me honor the values I've chosen? That's when you stop acting like someone being tossed around and start behaving like the one who shapes their own life. The real difficulty isn't that you don't know what's within your control. The difficulty lies in your unwillingness to let go of what's outside your reach because you've attached your sense of safety to it. You want others to validate you. You want everything to go according to plan. You want the world to operate according to your ideals. But life does not follow personal preferences. And if you continue to demand that it should, you will always be disappointed. Letting go doesn't mean shirking responsibility. It means you stop wasting energy on the impossible. You stop trying to control others' behavior and instead control your own character. You stop demanding perfection and learn to be patient and flexible. You stop living in stress over results and focus on the process, the only place where you truly hold influence. The issue is your mind often clings to outcomes because they're the most visible metric. But it's this attachment to outcomes that makes you more prone to disappointment, impulsiveness, and giving up when things don't go your way. Meanwhile, those who understand the principle of inner discipline will focus all their attention on behavior. Write well today, study well today, act rightly today, leave the rest to time. When you live like this, not only does your mind feel lighter, your actions become sharper and more decisive. Marcus didn't try to control the outcomes of war. He focused on personal virtue, calmness, speech, and the quality of every small decision. That's why he became one of the most enduring figures of Stoicism, not because he won everything, but because he never let what he couldn't control corrupt his soul. You too must build the habit of asking, is this within my control? If yes, I act. If no, I adjust my mindset. This is the core skill that helps you avoid countless unnecessary conflicts and suffering. You don't need everyone's approval. You need to stay true to your principles. You don't need to control every situation. You need to learn to face them with clarity. And remember, letting go does not come from weakness. It comes from inner strength, strong enough to accept this truth. You are not the center of the universe. You don't command the flow of life, but you can learn how to steer your boat through every current. That's how you move from struggling to navigating. And only when you master the internal compass can you go far in the external world. You don't need to control everything to live in peace. You only need to master the part you can, deeply, consistently, and with awareness. Every small action you control today, the words you speak, the reactions you choose, the boundaries you set, forms the foundation of a steady life, no matter how turbulent the outside world becomes. If you find yourself anxious, angry, or drained, stop and ask, am I trying to control something beyond my power? That one question will return your clarity. And in that clarity, you will see where your energy is worth investing and what should be allowed to pass like the wind. Because in this uncertain world, happiness does not belong to those who control everything. It belongs to those who know the boundary between what they own and what they must release. You cannot choose everything that happens to you, but you always have the power to choose how you respond to it. And that response, not the circumstance, is what defines who you are. A person who lives like a victim is always reactive. They believe their emotions are controlled by others, that sadness is caused by someone else, that anger is forced by the situation, that failure is the world's fault. They hand over all their inner power to external forces. But a person who masters themselves is different. They are the architect of every response, not to pretend to be calm, but to live with intention. Marcus Aurelius faced betrayal, plagues, the death of his children, and hatred from subordinates. Yet you will not find a single complaint in Meditations, because he understood if he allowed circumstances to dictate his mood, then he would have lost the most precious asset, spiritual freedom. And that is what I want you to recognize. There can be no lasting strength if you do not learn how to redesign your response to life. Emotions are not the enemy, but unconscious reactions are what hurt you. When someone insults you, you can choose to shrug instead of striking back. When failure hits, you can choose to learn instead of blame. When plans fall apart, you can choose to adapt instead of accuse. These choices are not always easy, but they are opportunities to forge yourself and turn every situation into a foundation to elevate your character. You may have once reacted like a victim. That's nothing to be ashamed of. But continuing to live like a victim when you know you can be different is the true tragedy. No one comes to teach you how to master your emotions. Society teaches you how to demand. School teaches you to find right and wrong, but very few places teach you how to observe yourself internally and choose your response from a conscious state. That is a skill that true adults must teach themselves, train themselves in, and take responsibility for themselves. And where do you start? From the very moment you feel the urge to react strongly. Pause for one beat. Ask yourself, does this reaction move me closer to the person I want to become? If not, you already have the right to choose differently. You don't need to appear right. You need to be aligned with what you truly value. Calmness, understanding, steadiness, kindness. No one can fully control their reaction the first time, but every time you pause to observe, you are laying the groundwork for a new nervous system, a system no longer triggered by instinct, but governed by reason and your personal values. Marcus wrote, "You may not control what others do, but you absolutely control what it means to you." That sentence alone can change a person's entire life if they dare to live by it. You no longer have to fall into emotional traps every time something goes wrong. You no longer have to fight to be heard. You no longer have to act like a victim to gain sympathy. You act because you know you are shaping a higher version of yourself, one reaction at a time. What makes truly strong people different is not that they feel no pain, anger, or disappointment. It's that they don't let those emotions drive them off course. They let them arise, but they don't let them take the wheel. They look directly at the emotion, learn from it, and choose an action aligned with a greater purpose. That kind of maturity is not something anyone can give you. Only you can build it by living with awareness through every tense moment. Remember, you cannot control the emotion that arises, but you can absolutely control your next response. That response is your design. It is the silent declaration of the person you are becoming. Every time you choose not to be pulled into a lower state, you are clearing the path for your higher wisdom to lead. And the more often you do this, the clearer it becomes. Calmness is not a personality trait. It is a skill to keep yourself in a proactive stance when the world around you spins out of control. If you've ever felt hurt by others, felt powerless when misunderstood, felt insulted when dismissed, you are not alone. But from today on, you can choose not to let those things define you, not to let them build walls within you, not to let them make you react as if you are helpless. You are not helpless. You just haven't realized that you can choose again. Your words, your tone, your behavior, and the meaning you assign to every experience. You don't need anyone to apologize before you forgive. You don't need anyone to admit fault for you to be at peace. You don't need circumstances to change before you begin to act with goodness, because you are not a victim. You are the one who redesigns your inner life every single day. And once you rise in that identity, nothing external can shake the center within you. Marcus lived like a spiritual architect. He wrote constantly not to escape emotions, but to see them more clearly. You can do the same. Rewrite the reactions you want to have. Practice speaking less when angry. Practice breathing deeper when agitated. Practice observing instead of reacting. Practice choosing moral action over instinctual reflex. Every time you do this, you're not just avoiding trouble, you're building a life of depth, stability, and inner stillness. Don't live like a victim. You were not born to surrender. You were born to choose again. and to prove that the person inside you is always greater than the circumstances outside you. You are the architect of every reaction, every thought, every action you create. And your life, it doesn't lie in anyone else's hands. It is built from that very choice. What causes you to lose yourself is not a major failure, but the small compromises. Not one big mistake, but repeated impulsive choices. A piece of cake when you're trying to lose weight. Postponing work just to watch one more episode. Spending money instantly because of a fleeting emotion. These may seem harmless, but that chain of short-term pleasures is quietly draining your self-control, self-respect, and long-term vision. Marcus Aurelius understood this well. He didn't view the denial of pleasure as self-punishment, but as character training. Because to live by your desires is to live like a slave. You are pulled by cravings, by emotions, by what feels easiest in the moment. But to live by reason is to live like a sovereign. You choose difficulty in the present in exchange for depth in the future. In the modern world, everything is designed to provoke your instant reaction. Purchases are just a tap away. Entertainment is just seconds from reach. Every door opens to immediate gratification. And that's exactly why patience has become rare. Because patience demands that you look beyond the feeling of now. You must dare to not need everything right away. You must be strong enough to say no to what's easy because you're saying yes to something better. Delaying gratification is not a rejection of happiness. It is the wisdom that what you want most never comes from indulging every fleeting desire. Want a healthy body? Learn to say no to daily temptations. Want meaningful work? Embrace the difficult phases without quitting out of boredom. Want a lasting relationship? Learn to navigate through differences instead of withdrawing at the first sign of conflict. Anything with depth requires time, and you cannot have depth if you only live on the surface of what feels pleasant. Each time you delay gratification, you send a strong signal to your mind. I am someone with vision. I don't live by passing emotions. I live for long-term goals, and that makes you different. While most people trade time, health, relationships, and integrity for temporary pleasures, you choose to retain your inner freedom because you understand anything that comes too easily can also cost too much if you aren't alert enough to filter it. Marcus didn't deny pleasure because he didn't know how to enjoy life. He denied it because he knew that if he couldn't control his cravings, even the throne wouldn't save his character. And the same holds true for you today. It doesn't matter how much money, opportunity, or support you have. If you don't train your ability to manage desire, you'll be led by the smallest things. And someone who is driven by sensations cannot build anything lasting. Delaying gratification is a life skill, but more importantly, it is a declaration that you are mature enough not to live by reflex. You are deep enough not to let longing dictate behavior. And you are brave enough to remain still in temptation instead of being pulled into the easy spiral. Every day you'll face dozens of moments like these. Eat more or stop. Procrastinate or finish on time. Spend emotionally or invest in what you truly need. These are all tests, not moral tests, but tests of your resolve. And let me be clear, every time you resist a small temptation, you are accumulating great strength. You are training your brain to understand that nothing controls you except you. You are building neural resistance, what scientists call the capacity to resist delayed rewards. As this region strengthens, you become calmer, clearer, and more resolute. And that is the foundation of every true success. You won't always succeed at delaying gratification. There will be times you falter, indulge your emotions, and choose ease over what's right. But don't stop there. Use those failures as data to learn. Observe what made you weak in that moment. Were you unprepared, too exhausted, lacking a clear goal? Then begin again with a better strategy, a higher awareness, and a deeper commitment. Marcus once said, "You have power in every small decision, And that is where your destiny is determined. Not in the big events, but in the moment you say no to the easy choice, to say yes to what's right. That is the moment when you don't need praise, but still preserve integrity. Don't need an audience, but still keep showing up. You cannot live a profound life if you always choose sensation over value. You cannot build self-trust if you always compromise for fleeting moments. And you cannot create something great if you don't learn to withstand the small without complaint. Delaying gratification is the act of a mature mind. It's the first step toward not living in a loop of consumption, but living in a process of creation. It's how you preserve freedom in a world where everything is trying to manipulate you with fast, easy pleasure. And it's the sign that you're living not for today's emotions, but for the person you're becoming 5 years from now. You can start right now. No need to wait for anything big. Just say no to one small habit pulling you away from your long-term vision. And every time you do that, you are building a life that is no longer impulsive, but deep, resilient, and anchored in a strength no one can buy. Not everyone understands the path you're walking, and they don't need to. If you keep stopping to explain yourself every time someone doubts, criticizes, or questions you, you'll have no energy left to move forward. True steadiness doesn't come from how well you argue. It comes from your ability to stay silent, unmoved, and keep going as if you know exactly where you're headed. Marcus Aurelius didn't react to every rumor. He didn't try to correct others' perceptions of him because he understood truth doesn't need to be defended with arguments. It reveals itself through behavior, through consistency, through integrity, proven over time. You weren't born to please the crowd. You were born to do what is right, even if that means being misunderstood, doubted, or rejected. Some people won't like your steadiness, won't like your silence, can't stand that you don't react the way they expect. But you don't need to adjust your course because of noise. You only need to stay aligned with your internal compass. Is my behavior honest with the goal I've chosen? Those who have never built anything meaningful will always have time to comment on those who are taking action. That's the rule. Those who stand on the sidelines always have more opinions than those in the arena. The further you go, the more you must learn to pass through public opinion without getting stuck in it. Not because you're arrogant, but because you cannot let your mind be consumed by what doesn't serve your journey. Silence is a form of strength. It does not mean passivity or weak tolerance. It is a deliberate choice. Not reacting on impulse, not feeding meaningless conflict, not turning your precious energy into fuel for unnecessary battles. When you stay silent, you're proving that you don't need to win every conversation. You only need to win over yourself, win over impulsiveness, the need for validation, the craving to always be understood. Let others think wrongly if it doesn't make you live wrongly. You don't have to carry the emotional burdens others place on you. You are only responsible for the quality of your own character. And if your actions are guided by reason, discipline, and sincerity, then you don't need to bend yourself just to please people who aren't truly walking this path with you. You need composure to move forward in silence because silence is not retreat. It's a proactive act. I choose to focus on the path instead of scattering myself in arguments. I choose to move forward rather than stop to explain. I choose true progress over short-term victories in back and forth disputes. Marcus once wrote, "Don't waste your life on things that don't align with your goals." A criticism with no constructive value, irrelevant. A slander from someone who doesn't understand the process you're in, irrelevant. A doubtful glance, irrelevant. Once you learn to draw the line between what's worth receiving and what must be let go, you begin to live with a cleaner, calmer, more grounded mind. You'll encounter people who see your silence as arrogance, your firmness as inflexibility, your focus as selfishness. But if you stop to explain every choice, then who will be the one actually living your life? You don't need anyone's forgiveness for following your own ideals. You don't need anyone's confirmation that you're on the right path. The right path will give you signs from within, a clear, quiet, but undeniable sense that I'm headed in the right direction. Those who go far don't talk much. They don't argue to be acknowledged. They work quietly. They let results speak. They know time is the most trustworthy witness. And if you're walking a difficult path, the path of self-discipline, of rejecting instant pleasure, of staying true to values, don't expect others to understand. They won't understand until you reach the destination. And even then, some still won't understand. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that you've lived true to yourself, not dependent on external validation. Silence isn't the absence of reaction. It's the highest form of response. When you choose not to let outside noise distort the voice within. The more you learn to walk through criticism without needing to prove anything, the lighter you'll feel, the clearer your mind will become, and the less controlled you'll be by the need to be understood. No one requires you to explain every step. Your silence, when paired with perseverance, is the clearest explanation of all. And then one day you'll look back on the road you've walked, filled with moments of being misjudged, rejected, misunderstood. But what you'll feel won't be resentment. It will be gratitude. Because through it all, you learned how to keep going without breaking. Through it all, you discovered that calmness is not avoidance. It's knowing where to place your focus, when, and on what truly matters. If you're being criticized for living differently, for choosing a road few dare take, for not reacting the way others expect, smile. Because you're living with purpose. You're learning to keep the wind still inside you, even when storms rage outside. And you're walking without needing an audience, because you know the true destination is not applause, but honesty with your own journey. You can't invent a meaningful life all by yourself, but you can learn from those who have lived one, not by idolizing them, hanging their pictures on the wall, or quoting their words like magic spells, but by observing their behavior, understanding the principles they live by, and applying them bit by bit to your own life. Marcus Aurelius didn't idolize anyone, from his stepfather's integrity, from his teacher's calm, from a friend's compassion. He wrote down the qualities he wanted to develop, not to admire them, but to embody them. That's the humility of a true great, never thinking he's enough, always looking outward to learn more deeply and live more rightly. You don't need someone perfect to learn from. You just need someone real, someone who has overcome what you're struggling with, someone who possesses a quality you want to grow within yourself. That person might be a teacher in a book, a quiet friend, a father who never complains, or a janitor who smiles silently while working. What matters isn't how famous they are, but whether their life says something that makes you want to live differently. But learning from others isn't copying. It's the process of observing, selecting, and acting. You don't blindly impose their lifestyle onto your circumstances. You don't repeat their words mindlessly. You learn to understand the principle and then allow that principle to come alive in the way you think and behave. A good student isn't one who memorizes everything the teacher says, but one who can apply it flexibly to real situations. Life is the same. If you admire someone for their calmness, don't stop at praising them. Observe. What do they do daily to stay calm? How do they react when insulted? How do they choose their words in conflict? Then you apply one small thing to yourself. Today, you choose to listen instead of interrupt. Tomorrow, you choose not to respond immediately when misunderstood. Every time you do this, you're allowing your role model to become a part of your own character. Idolization makes you passive. It creates distance, as if that person is on a pedestal you can never reach while you remain below, looking up. But taking someone as a role model is an active choice. You don't need to admire them forever. You need to act like them within your own capacity. And every time you do something that reflects their spirit, you're closing the gap between who you are and who you aspire to become. Marcus didn't write about Socrates as a saint. He documented Socrates' qualities as a behavioral guide: self-control, critical thinking, the ability to argue without offense. And then he applied those in ruling the empire, confronting enemies, and writing his journal. That's how role models work. Not hanging on a wall, but living through your smallest daily behaviors. You can start with a list of people you respect, not because they're famous, but because they're authentic. Write down one quality you want to learn from each. Then ask what behavior of theirs best reflects that quality. And next, how can I apply that in my own life today? Don't wait for a similar circumstance. Pick any ordinary situation and use it to cultivate that trait. You can't develop patience by reading theory, but you can develop it every time you wait in line. Every time you talk to someone who processes slowly, every time you wait for something important, and you can remember your role model as a mental reminder. If it were them, what would they do right now? Good role models don't make you a clone. They awaken what's already within you, that which may have long been dormant due to lack of direction. As you walk the long path of discipline, there will be days you're tired, doubtful, confused, and in those moments, the image of someone who has lived rightly, stayed committed, and chosen the hard road anyway will become a small flame lighting your path. You're not alone when you have a role model, not because they do the work for you, but because they prove to you that what you're striving for is possible, that the qualities you're developing are real, once lived by real people in real life. And that's enough to keep you going when you feel like giving up. A role model isn't a destination. They are a companion within your inner world. They don't need to know you exist, but every action you take today carries a piece of their influence. That's the deepest kind of inspiration, silent but enduring, non-imposing but guiding. Don't idolize anyone. Learn from them. Let them be proof of the human capacity to rise, and let yourself become a role model for others, not because you're perfect, but because you dare to live rightly, dare to practice, dare to persist in silence, and dare to choose depth in a world full of easy options. You don't have to be anyone else, but you can always become a better version of yourself by learning from those who walked before you and continuing your own journey with qualities forged through action. That's how you live, not to idolize, but to carry on a quiet but powerful tradition, the tradition of those who live with focus, with reason, and with a life worth remembering. The day doesn't end when you close your eyes. It ends when you look at yourself. A day that passes without self-reflection is a day lived unconsciously. And if many such days follow each other, you'll soon drift away from your original goal without even realizing it. Marcus Aurelius understood this deeply. Even as an emperor, he took time every night to write, not to record events, but to reflect on himself. He didn't write for others to read. He wrote to center himself, to check whether his mind was still aligned with the virtues he had chosen. And you need such a moment every day, a moment where you don't rush through time, don't avoid the truth, don't hurry to end the day, a quiet space to return to the core question, how did I live today? Self-reflection is not self-blame. It is the noble act of someone who is truly living consciously. You can't improve something if you don't observe it. You can't grow if you're not honest with yourself about your weaknesses. And there's no better way to train mindfulness than by sitting down every evening and asking yourself, today, which of my reactions didn't align with the values I pursue? What made me lose control? Where did I choose the easy path instead of the right one? You don't need to write pages. Sometimes just one line is enough. I was irritable when it wasn't necessary. But that line is the key. It awakens you. It makes you silently promise yourself, tomorrow I will handle a similar situation better. And if you maintain that honesty every day, you'll see the magic happen. You'll change without any drama, no shocks, just observation, adjustment, and acting again with respect for yourself. A mind that isn't frequently reviewed is easy to program with old habits. You may have learned the right principles, read dozens of books, heard countless lectures, but if you don't create a space to cross-record those with your daily behavior, it's all just dead knowledge. Knowledge only becomes wisdom when it is applied, tested, realized, and corrected. And that loop can only happen when you sit with yourself, not rushing, not judging, but just observing clearly. Marcus wrote, not because he was always right. He wrote because he wanted to see himself more clearly. He wanted to understand the roots of negative emotions. He wanted to observe the subtle habits pulling him away from the qualities he cherished. And you should also see your nightly self-review as a form of mental hygiene. Every day you're exposed to a series of stimuli: praise, criticism, disappointment, temptation, bad news. If you don't clean your mind before stepping into a new day, those invisible marks will gradually form biases, reactions, and grooves. And when you act according to those grooves, you'll lose the self-control you've worked hard to build. Self-reflection every evening is how you reset the operating system of your mind. You check what beliefs dominated you today, positive or limiting. You assess which choices made you proud and which ones need adjustment. You identify the situations that pulled you away from the path you committed to, and then you record it without blame, without excuses, just a record, because recording is the first step of transformation. No one becomes calm simply by wishing for it. The calm person is the one who has observed themselves enough not to be led by unconscious reactions. And that doesn't happen naturally. It is forged every night, every line, every time you face the truth without running away. Don't wait until life forces you to stop for a major crisis to start reflecting. Take the initiative to review when everything is still running smoothly, so you don't fall into the most dangerous trap: outward success, but inner chaos. If you've ever felt like you're living without progress, it might not be because you lack knowledge, but because you lack the pause. No time for your mind to settle, no habit of looking back to learn. You don't need anyone to evaluate you. You just need an honest glance from yourself. And that glance, if repeated every day, will become the light guiding your way, not through words, but through deep inner focus. Self-reflection doesn't demand you to be perfect. It only demands you to be honest. You can write, "I was lazy. I lacked patience with a loved one. I did something just to be acknowledged." That's okay, because you're building a foundation that no one can see, but that foundation will support every action, every relationship, and every decision in the future. If every night you take just 10 minutes to sit down, no devices, no noise, and ask yourself, am I living according to the person I want to become? Then you will see your life change, not needing luck, not needing a major turning point, because the greatest thing you can change is the depth of your awareness in every small action. And finally, remember, you don't reflect to punish yourself. You reflect to do better, deeper, clearer, and closer to the person you were born to be. A person who lives with purpose, who has strength, who continuously adjusts from the inside, not from outside pressure. That's not an idealized model. That's you. If you have the courage to sit down every night and look yourself in the eye. Discipline is often confused with coercion. People think that living with discipline means limiting oneself, cutting off joy, and turning oneself into an emotionless machine. But that is a fundamental misunderstanding. Because if you truly understand what discipline is, you'll realize discipline doesn't imprison you. Discipline liberates you. It doesn't narrow your life. It opens up the possibility to live in alignment with the highest version of yourself, not being pulled by desires, not being manipulated by emotions, and not being dependent on circumstances. Marcus Aurelius was an emperor, but he didn't live like someone entitled to power. He lived like an inner warrior, disciplined in every action, every reaction, every thought, not because he was forced to, but because he chose to limit himself according to profound principles so that he wouldn't live with regret. You are the same. When you set healthy boundaries for yourself, when to work, when to rest, what to eat, what to say, what to choose in relationships, you don't lose freedom, you truly gain it. Because you're acting based on will, not reflex. A person without discipline seems to live comfortably, but in reality, they live in dependence. dependent on their mood, on the validation from others, on instant gratification, on everything external to feel adequate. But a disciplined person doesn't need reminders to do the right thing. They don't need motivation from outside to act. They live because they've chosen this path, the path of living in alignment with their highest values, even when it's not easy, not quick, and sometimes not recognized by anyone. You don't need discipline to prove something to anyone. You need it to protect what's most precious, your inner integrity. When you don't have discipline, you're easily swayed by circumstances. You're impulsive, regretful, directionless. But when you live by principles, you build an inner axis that helps you stay grounded amidst chaos. And that steadiness is true freedom. Freedom from inner conflict, from regret, from the disconnection between what you believe and how you live. Discipline doesn't stop you from enjoying life. It helps you enjoy the right things. It makes a simple cup of tea feel profound. Sitting with a loved one feels complete. Doing a small task feels meaningful because you no longer live in a state of lack where you always need more to feel enough. You live in self-mastery where you know when to stop, when to move forward, when to be silent, and when to act decisively. Discipline doesn't take away your nature. It returns your original nature, something that was covered by unconscious habits. The disciplined person doesn't always have to be strict, but they have the ability to maintain commitment, and that's what makes them different. When they say they will do something, they do it. When they set a goal, they pursue it. When they know what's right, they don't quit because of fatigue or temptation. They're not perfect, but they're stable. They don't win in every circumstance, but they don't give up when they fail. And that builds trust, not just with others, but with themselves. And you know what? The feeling of being trustworthy with yourself is one of the noblest forms of freedom. Marcus didn't need anyone to see him adhering to his principles. He just needed to know that he didn't betray what he believed. You're the same. Maybe no one sees you waking up early, reading books, working in silence, training your body, keeping promises to yourself, but you know. And that nourishes an inner quality that allows you to move through life without feeling empty. When you live consistently with what you cherish, you don't need to speak much. Your presence alone says it all. If you ever thought that discipline is harsh, try living 1 week without it. Let your mind guide you. Let emotions dictate your actions. Let every invitation pull you away from your plan. Then you'll see the feeling of being tired, scattered, losing control, even getting angry at yourself for knowing what's right and still not doing it. On the other hand, live 1 week with intentionality. Set work hours, rest hours, limit time on social media, eat right, sleep right, study consistently. You'll find a very different kind of peace. Not from the outside, but from within. Discipline is the bridge between the person you are today and the better version you know you can become. No one can build that bridge for you, but every small action today, being on time, keeping your word, doing the right thing, is a brick you're laying down. And one day when people look at you with admiration for your calmness, wisdom, and strength, they'll think you were born that way. But only you know. It's the result of hundreds of days lived correctly in silence. You don't need to do anything extraordinary to live a valuable life. You only need to do the right thing consistently, and discipline is the system that helps you maintain that. It doesn't take away your freedom. It only removes impulse, distraction, and things that keep you from living at your true potential. In return, it gives you a life that's profound, resilient, and worthy of pride from the inside out. If you've made it to the end of this journey, look back. What you once thought was a limit is actually freedom. What you once avoided because you thought it was forcing has now become the foundation of serenity. And if you're ready, then from tomorrow, don't ask how to be motivated. Ask, which discipline will I keep so I can live the truest, highest, and most free version of myself? Because discipline doesn't imprison you. It is the path that leads you into yourself with dignity.